Good morning, good evening, and a warm welcome for all of you for joining us for today's insightful session. This webinar is titled Navigating Supply Chain Disruption with Power of AI. We truly appreciate your time and interest. It means a lot to us. My name is Arvind Kannan. I'll be a host for today's session. I'll be delighted by joining my colleague Archana and Naveen Kumar, who will be assisting in this throughout the session to ensure that it runs smoothly. And special shout out to Nitin Naveen, who's VP Innovation Strategy at AI CoreSpot. We are genuinely excited to have you as joining us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming supply chain and helping business overcome today's biggest challenges. In today's fast-paced, unpredictable world, supply chain are under consistent pressure, whether it's due to customer demands, changing and global disruption, labor shortages, or logistics delay. The good news is AI is proven to be a game changer, enabling faster responses, smarter decision, and greater resilience across the board. So before we get started, I'll give a quick round of introduction about AI CoreSpot. We are a global thought leadership platform dedicated to advancing conversation around AI, digital transformation, and Industry 4.0. For the past 4 years, we have been curating insightful webinars and hybrid events, and digital content have been bringing together top mind leaders like yourself across the sectors. Our goal is to help professionals like you to stay ahead of the curve and backed by digital data-driven insights, expert-led discussion, and collaborative knowledge ecosystem. You can explore our upcoming sessions and resources at aicospot.io and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates. Introducing today's panel, will be joined by the deep experience in managing complex supply chain systems and using AI-driven innovation. Please joining me and welcome Preetham Devnath, Senior Director for Senior Director for Enterprise Application Engineering at Cisco. And we have Anand Kumar, Director of Technology and Insights from Kenview. And guiding today's discussion is Jaydev Doshi, who's Director of Retail Consumer Goods and Logistics vertical at InfoVision. We are thrilled to have this incredible panel with us, and we look forward to have an insightful session by sharing their insights. A quick disclaimer before we get started. The views shared by the speakers are the personal one and not related to the organization which they represent for. Without wasting any time, I'll quickly hand it over the stage to Jaydev to host this panel discussion. Over to you, Jaydev.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Arvind, and thank you so much, AI CoreSpot, for organizing this event. It is a really interesting topic, especially within the ecosystem of supply chain. The last few years of supply chain, we've seen so many disruptions that are happening, and some of them are on the good side with the advancement in the technology space, with a lot of new technologies coming in to improve the overall processes within supply chain ecosystem. Some of them not so good because of external factors. So just to name few, within the last 5 years itself, we've seen so many drastic changes. 2020 was a year where the pandemic kind of made everyone rethink how their supply chain ecosystem works, with a lot of countries kind of hunkering down because of the pandemic. 2021 saw the challenges within the supply chain ecosystem with the Suez Canal getting blocked because of favor given the large boat getting stuck. And it just feels like ages ago that we had that news, because somewhere around 2023, again, we faced huge issues with the overall within the ecosystem with the shortages in the chip industry, which led to a lot of other industries rethinking about how their supply chain ecosystem works, how the global dependencies are there. And again, in 2024, we have shift in the industry because of a lot of global pressures due to the tariffs and other changes, right? Within all this, we also had some interesting times with 2022 becoming the advent of ChatGPT. And while AI and overall artificial intelligence and was one of the key talking points across the industry, what ChatGPT did was, with the launch of it, it kind of revolutionized the speed at which the industry was growing in this direction, right? The adoption suddenly became mainstream, and every industry within, not only within supply chain, but every industry across the spectrum started thinking about the strategies that it would need to be at the forefront of this, right? today's discussion, we want to focus on how the power of AI is helping industries solve the challenges they face within the supply chain ecosystem, especially with the disruptions that we've seen over the years. I'm really excited with the panelists we have today. We have Preetham and Anant, both of them stalwarts of their own industry, and they bring in deep expertise from having worked on multiple implementations, multiple digital transformations, and they have been there, done that within the supply chain on the transformation, leveraging the power of AI. Right. Without further ado, I'll take a moment and I would like to do a quick round of introductions with the panelists that we have. So I'll hand it over to Preetham. And Preetham, if you can give us a short introduction about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jaydev, Arvind, the AI Course Spot, and everyone actually for on the opportunity. I think it's a very, very relevant topic, something that is very close to my heart. So yeah, as for myself, Preetham here. I am this. I work at Cisco Food Services, and I'm the senior director of Cisco's inbound supply chain and enterprise applications engineering. So that includes, capabilities like demand planning, purchasing master data, purchasing lifecycle management, etc. So yeah, pretty as you could imagine, the topic disruption, supply chain disruption, is pretty close to what I pretty much live every day. So yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Preetham, and really looking forward to hearing from you on this topic. Anant, if you can go ahead, you can do a quick round of introduction.
Hello, everyone, and then thank you to AI Course Spot and the team here to have me here on the panel. So I am a supply chain professional with an operations professional who's really enthusiastic about technology and how it is shaping our workplace and worldview. I have over 15 years of experience, worked across 6 countries and across all geographies. Really, I lead the technology and insights team with Kenview, part of Johnson & Johnson earlier, and part of my job, I really bring about a lot of, I oversee a lot of technology transformation projects across supply chain, as well as quality, which is my core area. So I'm currently leading the global team there and really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anant. Really excited to have you here as well. Right. So without further ado, let's do a quick deep dive on the topic. The way I want to structure this conversation is, again, our focus is to identify the different disruptions that we've seen in the industry and how, with the power of AI, we've solved some of the use cases. Right. We would like to focus on the planning aspects of how planning has reshaped within the supply chain ecosystem automation, and we'll go from there. Right. So first and foremost, I would like to understand is with some of the disruptions that you mentioned, like since the last 5 years, we've seen so many things drastically reshaping our industry, right? With the ever-changing landscape of the supply chain ecosystem, how has industries adapted with the disruptions? Can you give some real-life world examples on how AI helped mitigate some of the major supply chain disruptions? I'll start this.
Yeah, I'll thanks, Jaydev. I'll probably go first. Yeah, so yeah, I think you brought it up. Yeah, I think you brought it up really well that in the last 5 years itself, it was, just to quote, like it was both the best of times and the worst of times in terms of supply chain disruptions. So yeah, from while we had a lot of supply chain disruption starting from COVID and right now, of course, multiple geopolitical challenges, macroeconomic and microeconomic issue, economic troubles, and also all the tariff related disruptions, right? What is happening is that technology is really helping enterprises deal with that. And especially on the advent of AI, AI as a whole, and generative AI as a subset of that, if I could say so, right? So, for example, so I am in the food service industry, or the food away from home industry per se, and as the largest food services distributor globally, there's a lot of products that is imported, right? And some of the tariff related disruptions, etc. It really helps when from a technology standpoint, when we have solutions enabled by AI, which kind of, first of all, understands the nature of the disruption proactively, instead of kind of going in a more reactive format, and then also to suggest what we call as NBA, or next best action, right? So because that's going to be crucial to determine the next best, because there will be a lot of data, as long in any big large enterprises, right, there will be a ton of data. So unless you convert them into actionable insights, that really helps in dealing with the major supply chain disruptions and challenges, whether that is in terms of planning, forecasting, how to make sure that you still serve your customers at an optimum service level and reduce your stock outs, etc. I think AI is playing a very, very crucial role in mitigating those disruptions, Jaidev.
Preetham, and you really brought it out that when it comes to AI, yes, Gen AI is playing a big role, but barring Gen AI, yes, there are a lot of other things that are happening within this ecosystem. Anant, if you would like to add anything to this.
And I like the point that Preetham made just now, right? And to build on what he has said, change and disruption is the new constant, right? There is going to be and I don't only talk about geopolitical events and what may be happening. If you even look at the way the compliance landscape is changing, right? A lot more your health authorities and all are becoming a lot more aware, starting to use technology, and their expectations and the because of the social media, the expectation of the end consumer has continuously evolved and adapted and become a lot more mature than it used to be previously, right? And with all of these changing aspects, and especially if you are working in a global setting, if you're addressing multiple countries and all, managing all of this in a manual way, like looking at and finding data and trying to mitigate, is going to get harder and harder. This is where I think AI has a huge role to play as it evolves. And agentic AI is the new buzzword, but more than agentic AI, I think the MCPs, which have come up, the model context protocols that have come up, are really going to be game changers in how we look at AI overall and how it drives value for the business. So how I envision it or see it is technology and whatever platforms the organizations may be using is to kind of become like a Google Map or a Waze or Apple Maps, whatever you use for your business decisions. Your starting point, you know where you are, you know the destination and where you have to be. And the disruptions become like the roadblocks, and the Google Maps or whatever maps you use, they keep on rerouting you to get to your final destination, right? And it gives you, okay, it'll take more time, more fuel efficient, more fuel or whatever else. Technology is going to help us in making better decisions. And this is where I see it plays a very, very important role.
Well, that's really interesting point that you brought in, especially with the way technology is kind of revamping our path towards success, right? We may probably think this is our path to success, but technology keeps on evolving and keeps on giving us a better ways, better navigational tools to reach our destination at a faster pace. So with that said, as you also mentioned, MCPs and agentic AIs, automation seems to be the buzz of the world. Like we had a lot of manual automation that we were doing earlier, but now with agentic AI, we are kind of doing systemic automation of the processes itself, right? So from warehouse to workflow, automation adoption is helping drive a lot of efficiencies. It's helping drive the ROIs, right? Both of you all have led several large-scale digital transformation initiatives. How do you define and proactively manage a resilient supply chain in today's AI-driven world? What are the things that you see within this ecosystem? Anant, you can go first.
Sure. So to answer this question, like this is a very broad question. And when we talk about AI or talk about digital technologies or automation, there are multiple areas which have to come together, and there are multiple technologies to make that happen. For example, Internet of Things, right? You have digital twins to understand the consequences of what we will be doing before you actually do it in the physical world. And then, of course, there are RPAs or the robotic process automations which exist. So different technologies or different maturity level will help us to really drive these transformation projects forward. For example, leveraging IoT for better visibility of what is going on in the warehouse. It can be for real-time data insights, or again, decision making, or something as critical or as simple as predictive maintenance, right? How do we monitor the equipment health and anticipate failures and schedule them for what we're doing? We are leveraging a lot of digital twins at this point in time to really help visualize, simulate, and analyze what will be the outcome if we make a change in this. Because yes, it is very easy to look at, for example, you mentioned warehouse as an individual setup or an individual area, but what is more critical is to see the impact of this warehouse in the value chain, right? So that we don't optimize one area and sub-optimize the entire value chain. How can we really think and bring in the end-to-end context? And in this, how do we do the right scenario planning, the right improvement programs that we have to do? And then, yes, of course, task automations come in, the scalability and flexibility of these come in. So it is in this day and age, and the advent of the tools that we have with the technology, the resilience, it really rests on the integration of these technologies to enhance visibility, optimize the processes, and really automate the operations as per the need of the business, right? And by leveraging IoT, you can really have real-time insights, real-time decision making. What these technologies are doing, like what internet did, was democratized information. AI and the advent of agentic AI are democratizing expertise. So how do you leverage these expertise to drive business resilience is going to matter.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's democratizing of the expertise with the advent of these technologies. Preetham, anything you would love to add? You're on mute, Preetham.
Oops, yeah. What I was telling is Anant has really put this really well. And just to add, kind of contextualizing for the industry that I'm working on, like in the food services industry per se. What your question was, how do you define supply chain disruptions, right? And in a pretty generic way, it's anything that kind of creates which impacts in a both in a positive but mostly in a negative way, because that's where you want to kind of mitigate it, right? Both your upstream and downstream supply chain. So both from an operations and a planning perspective. So again, some real life examples. Sudden change in demand, right? Sudden change in customer demand. It could be based on an unaccounted for disruption, maybe a weather pattern, right? Maybe a flood or something which impacts agriculture, right? Maybe something like a fire or any disruption in a water supplier's warehouse, right? So any of these are real supply chain disruptors, right? And how do we go about it? How do we make sure we plan? Well, we can't really plan for those, but number one, whatever we can, some of the data signals can we get in this age, right? And you're talking about, Anant was talking about digital twins. In this age where most of the information, right, is available, how can we be more predictive rather than more reactive and relying on descriptive analytics, more to getting into more predictive and prescriptive analytics? And you also brought up automation, Jaydev. How I see this is the whole agentic process automation or agentic AI is kind of an almost like an organic evolution of where we started with, and this was happening for like ages, right? Where we had script-based automation. Think of those VB macros, think of those emulator, because those are also automations at the end of the day, right? Of course, we what has changed is not the concept. I think what has changed is the technology and tools, right? So from those rules, from those to the erstwhile RPAs of the world, right, where we are talking about those rule-based automation, and then where LLM and infusing some of these automations with AI for better decision making, and then eventually with the advent of LLM, thinking of the the evolution of chatbots, right? How do you actually help? Anant, you were talking about how do we create expertise, right? How do we completely revolutionize customer support? How do we help with better understanding of supply chain disruptions? And then eventually agentic AI, which is not only just answering questions, but eventually they are actually acting on things. And I think that kind of differentiates between a pure play chatbot per se, a conversational AI interface with like agents, right? And we're also talking about multi-agent systems where things like MCPs and agent-to-agent protocols, etc., are coming into picture. So long story short, anything that disrupts the upstream or the downstream processes of supply chain, ranging from planning all the way through execution, warehouse, and transportation, and how we are mitigating those with the support of technology, especially with AI, and then eventually organically migrating to Gen AI and agentic AI.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you brought up. A couple of things that I would like to take away from this conversation with both of y'all is, one is essentially the definition of a disruption, as you rightly pointed out, Preetham, is a disruption is anything that kind of makes you stop what you're doing and rethink and reevaluate, make some changes to it, right? It can be both for a positive reason or for a negative reason. Negative reason is because of the supply chain issues, you are forced to stop what you're doing, rethink, and evaluate how you can do it better. Or it can be because of a positive reason, like with the advancement of technologies, you have a different tech stack available at your hand, and now you need to rethink to do it in an efficient way because you have the tools available with that, right? Some of the tools that we discussed was the agentic AIs and other things. Now, with a lot of these modern technologies that are coming in, one thing that I'd like to bring up is still we have a lot of legacy systems at several organizations, which are kind of the backbone of the entire industry, right? So while we see a lot of advancements from a technology standpoint, we still have a lot of legacy systems available, and there is this constant communication that needs to happen. There's this constant upgrade requirements on the system integration with the new technology and the legacy systems. Preetham, you've been an advocate for changes, ERP modernization and everything. So how do you see these integrations coming into play? Now, again, while we're discussing disruptions, this is more related to the disruptions that the technology is bringing into the ecosystem, forcing us to rethink how we evaluate and how we work on the systems. If you can bring some light to that.
Absolutely. So, see, how I look at it in terms of how I look at ERP modernization or legacy modernization as such, right, is not necessarily a black and white kind of model where it's a legacy versus modern, right? It could be that, and it could be a legacy and modern as well, right? Because of course, legacy over the course of decades, right? Whatever we have built over the years in mainframes of the world and AS400s and all, right? In fact, ironically, I actually started my career as a mainframe developer, and that was some experience, considering that no colleges actually teach mainframes. So actually, that was learning the hard way. but yeah, I mean, coming from or evolving from that role as a mainframe developer, I think I have been in both sides of the world, right? And what I do feel is that, there's a lot of data, there is a lot of resilience that is already there in some of our legacy tech stacks. And the problem that we are having, right, is not necessarily A versus B, but how do we make sure A talks to B seamlessly? How do we make sure we really get like data sharing enabled, right? How do we have a solid data infrastructure, etc.? And in some cases, absolutely go away from A if that makes sense to B. And at the end of the day, I think where I have seen multiple industries, right, go and sometimes fail also is, we sometimes tend to do legacy modernization for the sake of modernization or as a technology program. I think what we need to really, where I saw a lot of success is any technology modernization, right, whether it is ERP or anything else, should start and end with a business value, right? We should not first get a hammer and then start looking for nails, right? It should be the other way around. So,
Right.
so I think as long as we can keep the modernization human centered, right, where the persona is at the center of the of this entire program, I think that helps. So the question should not be, in my mind, right, the question should not be how do I modernize my ERP from, let's say, a COBOL to, let's say, Java or Python or whatever that is, right? The question should be how do I enable, as you said, or the topic of this webinar, right? How do I manage supply chain disruptions better, for example, right? And for that, if we find out that, okay, my business logics, my business rules are not decoupled enough, if my data is not shareable in near real time, that is a driver for legacy modernization, right? And not the other way around. So long story short, I think the key to any modernization should be to enable more business agility so that it helps business tackle any disruption, right? Supply chain disruption or otherwise better. And that way what we'll have is we will have business backing, and because at the end of the day, it's never about just technology, right? It's always a three-way play between people, process, and technology, right? So as long as we get that business alignment, then the people, the process, and technology will work in unison, and that results in a proper digital transformation.
That's really true. In fact, to paraphrase something that I take away from what you brought up is we shouldn't be doing a migration, or for that matter, and modernization just for the sake of it. Just because there's a latest and greatest technology out there, it's not something we need to pick up. We need to be solving problems that are within our industry. We need to be solving for certain disruptions that we are seeing, rather than just doing it for the sake of it, right? I'd like to tweak this question a little differently, Anand, for you, because you bring in an expertise of having been there, done that, implementations across the geography. You work, as you mentioned, you worked across 6 different locations over the tenure of your career. You worked across APAC regions, you worked across North America. What differences do you see overall from an AI adoption across regions for tackling supply chain disruptions that we envision in these different places?
I think before I answer this question, I would like to really appreciate the point which Preetham made, and the biggest one of that is that how it is very important, especially for the leaders at the organization, to avoid that shiny toy syndrome, that these technologies will keep coming up, and a lot of people get excited because a lot of people are sold these technologies as the elixir of life, like all problems will be solved just if you had agentic AI. Just if you had this, you're all set. And that is something which is a very challenging piece to overcome sometimes. And once you have overcome that, like people, process, and technology, Preetham mentioned, I'll just add one more piece to it of data, right? Any technology transformation that you are doing, any place where you want to add AI or whatever else you want to do, data is the foundation. If you do not have the right data, if you do not have the right governance around it, the structures of the data which flows seamlessly from one system to the other, or you're able to do that, you are bound to fail. You just cannot succeed. It will be a very high cost change if you decide to change something at all. And with the changes and the advent of a lot of technologies, composable architectures are becoming a lot more common than they used to. for anything that you want to achieve, and the objectives can be done. Now, moving to the point that you talked about, Jaydev, in terms of adoption of technology or how these are managed. So between APAC, Europe, and North America, there are multiple factors, like in terms of maturity of the technology, the market dynamics which are there, the regulatory environment which they operate in, and the cultural attitude that comes towards innovation, right? A lot of times we have seen that the affordability of technology itself becomes a hindrance in adoption, right? Because if you talk about Asia from 10 years from now, the cost of labor there was way lower than the cost of implementing the technology. So it did not make a business sense to really make that change. However, in developed markets, for example, US or some markets in Europe, the cost of labor was so high that it made all the sense to automate, all the sense to do this. Now that paradigm is shifting because the cost of labor is going up across the board, and the cost of technology has gone down across the board as it scales up. And because of this, like in North America, you see, has always been the place where a lot of innovation happens, gets adopted, and then it moves to the rest of the world, where then the speed of adoption is very different, right? For example, the protocols which may have been developed in North America have been adopted so much in Asia that it seems that they might have originated from there, like China or India or South Korea, when in reality they were developed. So a lot of times the propensity to innovate, the willingness to innovate is way higher in the North America market. However, adoption of technology and using it is way higher in APAC a lot of time. The regulatory environment or the regulatory framework in North America and US it tends to be more established, a lot more clear on the guidelines, data privacy rules, security and stuff, which help in moving in a much more structured way. Whereas in APAC, it is still catching up, right? In there are some countries like China which have a very robust regulation in place to support AI development, whereas there are others which are far behind. In terms of cultural attitudes, again in North America, there is a willingness to invest in new technologies, primarily because the cost of failures are not so high. Whereas in APAC, again, we see that in India, it is a lot more aggressive in adopting it, but then in the other markets, it may not be so. And if I talk about the collaboration and the ecosystem for development, like companies, like whether it be tech firms or startups or the product organizations like Kenview, the concentration of that investment is in North America. The value is in North America. However, the volume is in Asia as a market. Europe is a different animal altogether, where each country behaves so much differently and have regulations which are a lot more stringent, especially with GDPR, that it kind of stifles innovation, stifles scale up to some extent.
That's a very interesting point that you brought up, especially with the differences that you kind of highlighted across different geographies, like the challenges we face when it comes to AI adoption within the US versus the challenges we face in Europe versus the challenges we face in Asia. A lot of it can be attributed towards the culture in which the organizations operate in each of these different geographies, because a lot of cultural influences are affected. So when it comes to aligning to AI goals from an organization level, right, we have organizations that span across geographies. How do we bring in those visibility? How do we make those conscious decisions across the board? What is it that the CXOs and the board needs to focus on when it comes to AI adoption?
I will go back to what Prevan said and I reiterated in the beginning, right? It is business, right? None of the organizations are doing it for charity. If you're investing $100, if the returns are not in line with the ROI expectations that the organizations have, there is no investment that will be made. And their geographies do not matter as much. It's more the how that changes, but the decision is very, very clear.
That is true. Awesome. Thank you. That brings me to another key constraints that we were discussing about. In fact, you highlighted there when we were talking about the people, processes, and technologies of the space, you added a fourth element to this trinity, which is that of data, right? Data, we've been hearing over the last few years, especially since the starting of the internet age in 2000s, that data is going to be the new gold. Anyone who has the right set of data can do wonders with it, right? But over the last 20 years, one of the key challenges, one of the key issues that we've seen is also data. How we collect it, how we store it, how we manage it is kind of putting bottlenecks within to how we implement AI and how we really bring success to the industry, right? So when it comes to data, uh, what is significantly important to have data at the right time? We all agree. If we have the right data at the right time, it will help us drive the right things at a fast pace. What are the differentiating factors when it comes to success and failure from a data management perspective? If you can elaborate a little bit on that, Preetham, if you can start on this one.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, Anand and you both have kind of hit the nail on the head that data is paramount, and your systems, your integration, your AI is as good as the quality of your data. So if I can break this down, right, in terms of what are some of the, what are the differentiating factors, best practices, etc. Number one is, of course, how disparate is your data? Right? Question number one, right? So is it federated versus is it not? Now, there is no good or bad answer, right? It's not about data, it's about business model. So if it's a federated business model, then how do you consolidate your data for centralized decision making? If that's again, I think both Anant and I, what we are trying to say is at the end of the day, it has to have an ROI, right? So if centralized decision making makes sense and it adds agility to your decision making and your supply chain processes and all, does your data infrastructure support that? Do you have real time data streaming, for example, right, available from your different DCs, your different distribution centers and all? So that's one, that's the ingestion of data. Number two, how do you ensure data quality, right? How do you ensure your data is refreshed properly, your data has the necessary checks and balances to make sure it is ready for insights and analysis, and also for compliance. Anant was talking about compliance because that's really important. That's number two. Number three is now that you have your data ingested and you have certain quality measures and you make your data, production ready, right? Then comes the question of how do you want to derive insights out of those data, right? Is that more analytical insights? And for that you can use a different set of technology, a different set of a different set of structure from a data perspective, versus a more online transaction processing and more real time, where streaming comes into picture, where and again, all of these has a big all of this you have to, when we think of ROI, when we think of that project, it has to be measured against the cost, the investment, because the cost for a real-time data ingestion is completely different to an analytical need, right? So long story short, different, what are some of the differentiating factors? Number one, a solid data strategy, whether it is federated, non-federated, and that dictates whether it's a data lake, data warehouse, data mesh, data fabric, or a combination of it. A lot of it is hybrid, because then you look at how do you enable the data, right? How do you make it centralized so that you have certain checks and balances, so that you don't want bad data coming in and going out, right? And then of course, you have AI and you have the consuming systems on top of that data layer to make sure we kind of derive insights, actionable insights, which is more important from that data. So I would define that in those three different sections, and probably those will help in kind of being the differentiating factors for the success, which will make or break any transformation.
So much, Preetham. That's really enlightening. Anand, anything you would like to add?
I think Preetham covered very well from the organization standpoint, right? I'll just touch upon a very at a very macro level on why is it that data has been talked about for the last 20 years, 15 years, and still we still talking about it and face challenges around it, right? And I'll give an example of the EV industry, right? Tesla came up with a specific type of charger, and built that entire ecosystem around. And a lot of more EVs jumped in, and all of them started to have their own charger module, their own protocols, their own systems or standards. So across the industry, everybody was following their own thing. And that led to a big challenge in terms of adoption, as well as the new entrants to come in and start to use. Now there is an NACS, which is a North America standardized charger protocol, which has come in, which is Tesla's. And suddenly things have started to look different, right? Same thing applies to data. I was in a discussion with the top 15 pharma companies and all the CIOs. We were there as part of BioForum, and we were discussing like, why is it that we're still facing this challenge? And one thing which jumped out of this conversation was, when you look at multiple systems which are there, for example, I'll take Viva as a dock management system, or you have PLM systems and all which are there, or MES systems. There is no single data standard that exists within the same industry as well. And that continuously leads to innovation, if I can use the word very loosely, within the organizations to make their work happen. And because of that proliferation of ways of managing it, there is no one standard way, and it still remains an enigma. And it's in a place, and I've been working with a few startups on this place, this is like beyond ripe for disruption now, where someone, and I'll not name the organization, they are working, and we will see in the next 4 to 5 years, specifically in the pharmaceutical industry, we will see a big flip that will happen, where this question of data will stop to be asked. So, I'm not sure if I heard my echo. Yeah, but this question around data will be stopped asked, because you will see that they are forcing standardization in the industry. Yeah. So just like I'd like to add that macro level perspective on it.
No, that's really critical to this conversation on data. Like while we keep on talking on how AI can help revolutionize and help us solve some of the disruptions we are seeing in the industry, it is also bringing disruption because we don't have standardization, as you mentioned, and every company is kind of trying to evolve based on their needs, based on their requirements, right? So when as you kind of loosely mentioned this, every company has to innovate for their own needs. It may lead to more disruptions than evolution, because now you have so many disparate ways of doing the same thing that coming to a standardized way becomes challenging, right? Yeah, that is a great insight. But again, as you also said, when you have challenges, that's when you also have opportunities in the market to kind of bring solutions to some of the challenges. Awesome. That really brings. Let me take a quick segue and go through some questions that the audience has been asking. Let's try and answer some of those questions before we continue the topic. I see there's a question specific to the globalized AI adoption that we were discussing a few minutes earlier. The question is, given those regional differences in AI adoption, have you seen any unexpected innovations or workarounds that emerged from one region that that others could learn from? Maybe something that wasn't part of the original playbook. This is the question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm guessing it is more directed to the point which I made, right? So the regional differences in adoption that we see here, yes, there have been unexpected innovations and workarounds that have emerged from, right? And the thing which I'll talk about is the use of composable architecture to achieve the same end result, which would have been otherwise led to a multi-million-dollar investment in a new kind of a system. So in Asia, the budget that the team had was not to the tune of what the team in North America had, simply because our budgeting process is decentralized and each country or each region has to manage their own P&L. And this is where this composable architecture was utilized to develop a PLM system for the business, which gave what we needed to solve the business problem. And it was done at 1/10 the cost of what it would have been done otherwise. And that changed and became the part of our playbook actually. And now for any deployment, one of the questions that we asked is like, do we have the right data available with us so that we can directly use it and leverage the tools that we have to get and solve the business problem rather than go out and try and bring in those systems that I can give as a direct example.
Yeah, that is interesting because again, depending on geographies, we do have different budgets, and sometimes the innovation comes from the restrictions that are put around
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, in fact, one of the other examples that I always gravitate towards, it's not related to the RCL industry, but it's something that we've seen widely adopted across India, across Brazil, is the way the payment ecosystem has evolved, especially after pandemic, where we wanted touchless payment solutions. And that's where the QR code based payments, the UPI that India evolved, even Brazil has a similar model. While a lot of this was originally thought in US and in the Western economies, the adoption really evolved in the Asian countries. And we see a lot of use cases where the constraints that are put because of some of the disruptions we see in the industry kind of leads to unexpected evolution within the ecosystem. Anand, anything from you? Sorry, Preetham.
No, I think you both really told this succinctly. So yeah, nothing from my side. Just agree with whatever you said, that there are always cross-pollination of ideas, and there are multiple examples which I personally have seen where let's say we build a solution for North America, for example, and then we saw that it is actually relevant in Europe as well, right? Or it is relevant in Latin America as well. And exactly as Anand said, if we keep the solutions and architecture composable, that makes it more portable, more reusable, which helps in the scalability of the solution.
100%. Let me go to another question we have from the audience. This is related to the general topic that we are discussing. So we are trying to see how AI is powering our ecosystem and helping us solve some of these disruptions. We've kind of talked through how we run through some of the disruptions, right? So the question is, how should CISOs and CDOs rethink their AI investment strategy to move beyond disruption response and think more towards long-term competitive advantages?
I think, again, kind of echoes with, I think we all three are saying that at the end of the day, I think, as the question also rightly says, I think Kyla put the question, the key here is, what are those business cases, right? What are those business cases which give my industry or my company the long-term competitive advantage, right? So start with business capabilities, then map it, right? So that's what at least we have been following here, right? So first, the business capabilities which will potentially give us competitive advantage, map it down, break it down to sub processes, and then kind of put together the process maps and come up with those hotspots, if I could say so, right, where AI can really make a difference, right? And then invest towards that, right? Instead of like starting on with a broad like AI investment strategy and then coming up with business needs to justify that strategy, correct? So for example, if our competitive advantage is to provide better service to our customers with and kind of the lowest at the lowest cost, of course, which is a pretty generic one, right? For competitive advantage, what do we need? We need to better understand customer demand, so that we can be better, we can get more agility in our supply chain. We need predictable supply from our suppliers. So that itself, right, if you break this down, potential for an advanced forecasting investment, which is again an AI investment, or a better supplier collaboration that's probably has a Gen AI angle to it, or an even better data collaboration angle to it. So this is just an example in terms of how we can go from top down to kind of come to 3-4 different AI projects, work streams, investments, which will always have business backing because it starts from the business problem.
Awesome. One more question, and then we can probably jump back to our flow. Is what skills or mindsets are becoming essential in 2025 for supply chain leaders to successfully integrate AI into operations?
Let me give it a shot here, right? And I'll build on what Preetham mentioned from the previous questions, because again, that is linked to it, right? How should CSCs and CTOs rethink their AI investment strategies? As leaders of the organization, the individuals should focus on the bigger picture of what the ecosystem will evolve into, what the ecosystem will look like. Because it's not about optimizing the part, it is optimizing the whole, right? And in doing that, you have to be able to connect the dots very well. You have to be able to be very, very decisive and clear on how do you cut down on the noise, which you can only do by being very, very clear on the long-term objectives of the organization and long-term objectives of the business. And defining those is not as easy as it used to. Finding your edge, finding your competitive advantage is a lot more harder now because the entry barriers have reduced across industries, right? I'm not talking about the likes of NVIDIA where it is easier for them, but for bulk of the businesses, it is not so easy. And this is where you have to see why or are you going to do what you're going to do. And in terms of the skills, if you said the hard skills, as I shared previously, with the advent of agentic AI and all, your expertise is going to get democratized. As leaders, you should be able to understand how do you use this expertise towards the business objectives. How do you connect the dots? How do you nurture the talent and build their capabilities to solve for it? Because needs of the business are not going to be available from your universities or from the other industries. Those things become very, very critical. Like Preetham shared his example of mainframe programming, right? It is the same situation that we are in today. You go and think that you'll get AI experts, you will not. You have to nurture and you have to make those investments. So that becomes very, very important for leaders.
Yeah, and just to add to what Anand just said, right? I feel personally that this is probably the best time for learning, because we talked about the democratization. The democratization of learning, the concept of learning is something that is enabling a lot of people, right? So today, I really do not have to be having a degree in computer science or programming to actually create shippable software. Generative AI and some of the developer experience tools are making it so much easier for us. Some of the low code, no code revolution is making it so much easier for the business team, right? So I think what is important more than ever, right, is a mindset to learn. I think that's the most important thing, right? And as Anand said, to join the dots. Once you join the dots and have that mindset to learn, there are enough tools, there are enough low code, no code platforms, there are enough developer experience, AI solutions, and of course the related learning journey that are available for a team to quickly scale up. Now, of course, with to tell the cliche, with more power comes more responsibility, because that also triggers an unintended consequence of shadow IT, right? So we can always see in any big enterprises, right? So instead of a scalable solution, we have like 10 different solutions by 10 different departments. None of those are scalable, but they are like, and then what happens is if somebody kind of goes on vacation and all, you suddenly see something goes on fire. That's another type of disruption, right? So I think putting guardrails is very important. I think if we have proper guardrails, if we have proper architectural decisions and reviews, I think this is probably the best era as of now for learning and to build.
Thanks so much for that, Preetham. I really like how you bring in interesting quotes throughout your conversation and make it easier and digestible for the audience. Before we had some great conversations and had some great questions from the participants as well. So I would like to thank all the participants also for these questions. Really appreciate you participating through this. And thank you so much for all the valuable insights. Even I learned a lot throughout this conversation. Before we part, there are a couple of things I would like to discuss. One is, what advice would you like to offer to organizations who are just beginning their AI journey within the supply chain ecosystem? And it's open to either of you.
So Jaydev, sorry, I lost you for a bit there.
No, I was just saying just a couple of parting questions before we conclude this session. The first one is, what advice would you offer for any organization who are beginning their AI journey within the supply chain ecosystem?
So maybe I'll start. So if someone is beginning their AI journey, be very clear on why you want to get onto that journey and why you want to invest. And second, make sure that you have the right foundation from people, process, data, and technology.
Preetham?
Yeah, echo again both the points that Anand just said. My comment to them is, number one, you are not alone. A lot of people are starting their AI journey, so it's all right. And exactly, learn. First question, like why we are doing this, right? And it has to start from a business case. And number two, yes, as Anand said, work on the foundations, but just to add a nuance to it, let that not be the impediment. So sometimes we kind of are lost in that loop that unless my data is 100% correct and my foundation is 100% correct, we can't do it. That's that's a flip side of it, right? So I would take progress any day over, or I think at this point of time, right, where we are uber agile, right, I think we take progress every day over perfection, right? So yes, totally agree that we have to continually invest on the technology foundations, the infrastructure, etc. But we need not wait that long to make it 100% also. So it's a tightrope at the end of the day. As we know, it's not about just AI in general. It's always a tightrope walk, right? It's a tightrope walk between investment and returns. It's a tightrope walk between legacy and modern technology. It's a tightrope walk between AI and human in the loop. So as always, as in life, it will be a tightrope walk, and it's fun.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, it's always progress over perfection. It brings a quote to my mind that you don't have to wait for the audience to build a theater. You start building the theater and the audience would come, right? Thank you so much for those insights. And again, coming back to the topic that we had, right? Supply chain disruptions, and I'll probably generalize it a little. Disruptions in general within the industry, and what some insights from my side is what I've seen is usually every 20, 30 years, we see some major disruption that completely revamps the industry we're working on. Be it the 80s when we had the machines coming in and it revolutionized the manufacturing industry, be it the 2000s where we had, again, a lot of internet being the buzz which made people rethink, be it 2020 where Gen AI, Chat GPT, everything is kind of making us rethink how we work in the industry, right? Where do you see the industry going in the next 5 to 10 years? What next step of evolution are you envisioning, which will make us rethink how we look at the industry? And this is just a generic question, just as a parting thought for everyone.
Honestly, I don't know. I think I don't know is probably my closest answer to it, because the industry is shaping so fast and so many different changes are coming. I feel personally it helps me to keep that I don't know mindset and to be open to it, right? So as long as we are open to like learning, to pivot, to fail fast, I think we should be good. So yeah, my short answer is I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Anand?
He stole my answer. It is, if you ask me, it is easiest to predict 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line. I cannot predict for the next 1 to 3 years. I can predict 30 years from now what will happen, but not for the next 2 to 3 years. It is very difficult.
Totally understand. Well, thank you so much for the great insights. It was really a fantastic session. I really got to learn a lot from both of y'all, and it was a pleasure having you on the panel. And I would really like to thank AI CoreSpot for organizing this and for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. I'll hand it over to you, Arvind, for the panel.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you, Jaydev, for moderating this. Great. So heartfelt thanks to Preetham and Anand for their invaluable insights and experience shared today. So before we conclude, I would like to thank our community partners, speakers, and all of our attendees for enriching knowledge through this forum. Your presence and participation is really important to us. Our panel speakers have shared insightful thoughts and made this webinar a truly valuable experience. For today's webinar was broadcasted live in our LinkedIn page, and the recording will be available for your reference shortly. Please visit our website aicorespot.io and follow us on social media for updates on upcoming knowledge sharing session that will expand your horizon. I would like to thank our sincere thanks to our knowledge and innovation partner, Infovision, and technology partner for their significant contribution towards making this webinar a huge success. To learn more about Infovision and their technological advancement, please visit their website, infovision.com. Once again, thanks a lot for joining us today. Have a great day and wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.